All right, let's get things started. Hello and welcome to the Stratodesk Tech Talk series. I am Matt Scudder and I'll be your host today. For today, we have Emanuel Pirker, founder and CEO of Stratodesk, joining us, as well as Vadim Vladimirskiy, CEO of Nerdio. Thanks to our speakers for joining us. We're super excited to be having a discussion around adopting Microsoft Azure virtual desktops. As I spoke with both speakers today leading up to this event, I found it quite interesting, the similarities between Vadim and Emanuel. Certainly all of the standards that you would anticipate, well-read, 80-hour work weeks, driven by their passion in their business. But what was most interesting is both Emanuel and Vadim are also avid runners. So top tip of the day there, if you're looking to run a successful tech company that is disrupting the market and paving the way for innovation, as you'll see today, swing by your local shoe store, grab a fresh pair of tennis shoes and hit the pavement, because it takes not only a lot of dedication, but apparently 10 to 15 miles a day on the asphalt. So top tip of the day for those joining us. Let's talk a little bit about the agenda for today's Tech Talk. We're going to be talking about the key takeaway of adopting Microsoft Azure virtual desktops. We'll get into a little bit of the company overview for Nerdio and for Stratodesk. We'll talk about how we are navigating the transition for customers from on-premise to virtual desktops. We'll talk about the differences between Microsoft's offerings of both AVD and Windows 365. We'll get some insights from Vadim and from Emanuel on where they see this technology moving in the future. We'll talk about some specific use cases, and then we'll have a little bit of time, hopefully at the end, for some Q&A from the participants. So, hey, before we dive straight into it, I think for some of the folks on the call who might not necessarily be completely familiar with either Stratodesk or Nerdio, I'd like for each of you, Vadim and Emanuel, just to give us a little bit of an overview on your business, what problems you solve, and specifically how you partner together. Emanuel, maybe we'll start with you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Emanuel Pirker. I'm the founder and CEO of Stratodesk. Stratodesk is a company that operates exclusively on the endpoint, meaning the PCs, the thin clients, whatever kind of hardware you see out there on users' desktops or on users' labs. Why I say this first is because in this context, it matters. And I guess for many of you, this will already set up the scope of the partnership, and it needs way less explanation afterwards. So what we solve is the challenge that you face in any type of data center server-based scenario on your endpoints. What are they running? Different versions of Windows, different versions of hardware. Some are older, some are newer. We have a Linux-based operating system that goes on all these machines, a management software that manages those 100%. So you never need to touch any of these machines again. This is why we call our product No Touch, by the way. And this also explains why partnering with Nerdio is such a wonderful case. I would say it's almost a no-brainer, right? Because Nerdio is operating on the server side, the cloud side. We are solving these endpoint challenges. Just 1 second, what are these challenges? I mean, many of you are in EUC, obviously cost, security, manageability. These are the 3 top things that we solve on the endpoint side.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Emanuel. Vadim, could you give us a background on Nerdio?
I'd love to. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Vadim Vladimirskiy, and I am the CEO and founder of Nerdio. And I live in Chicago. And to give you a bit of a background on Nerdio and how we came about and about the problems that we help our customers solve, let me, I guess, get started by telling you that I I ran a managed services provider before starting Nerdio in Chicago, and we focused on a very specific model of IT. We focused on delivering what we called IT as a service, which was a packaged IT solution that included desktop virtualization as a way to deliver applications to all of our customers. And several years ago, we decided to create a management platform that would automate the deployment, provisioning, and management process within the service provider company that we were running at the time. And that's what became Nerdio eventually. So it was born as a software product within a services provider. Eventually, we realized that there was a lot of market demand from other service providers who wanted to put their customers into the public cloud, into Azure specifically, with a virtual desktop solution. So we created something that we called Nerdio for Azure, which was our first product that helped MSPs, managed service providers, deploy and manage and optimize RDS, or remote desktop services, which was the predecessor to AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop, prior to, let's call it 2019 or so. And that was kind of our first product, and we were, helping lots of different service providers. Microsoft at that time were working on a new project called RDMI, or Remote Desktop Modern Infrastructure, which is a way to modernize RDS. And they saw that we had an RDS management platform, and they asked us to integrate with what they were working on. And that eventually became WVD, or Windows Virtual Desktop, that launched, I think, towards the end of 2019, September, October timeframe. And when that product launched for Microsoft, I think a lot of people in the market started to be very interested in doing cloud-based virtual desktops. And lots of new customers started coming to us wanting to use Nerdio for their deployments and management. But these customers were typically enterprise companies, not service providers that we were used to working with. And they said, we really love your UI and the optimization and the auto scaling that you have, but it doesn't seem like the product is really made for us, because we're a large organization with, tens of thousands of users, and your product is more multi-tenant, meant for service providers, which in fact was the case. So what we decided to do was launch a new product, which is, I think, going to be the focus of our discussion today here, that we called Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. It was an Azure application, or is an Azure application, that helps IT organizations deploy, manage, and optimize virtual desktops in the Microsoft Cloud. This includes both Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365, and now even Azure Stack HCI-based on-premises deployments of AVD as well. And it really seeks to do two things. It seeks to solve two problems. Number one, reduce the complexity of deploying and managing AVD, because out of the box, it could be a little bit daunting and difficult to approach. And number two, it seeks to reduce the costs of a typical cloud-based deployment, because as we all know, cloud is priced on consumption, and the more efficient you can be with the consumption of your infrastructure. And for virtual desktops, there's a lot of optimizations that can be made, because not every user is using their desktop 24/7. As a matter of fact, they're never using their desktop 24/7. So there's a lot of opportunities for auto scaling, optimizations, and various cost reduction strategies that we help our customers achieve, which really gives them a pretty impressive savings on what they would otherwise pay for consumption of the public cloud out of the box. Obviously, as Emanuel mentioned, our partnership with Stratodesk is a very good fit, because we focus on the back end, we focus on the cloud and the server side of things, whereas Stratodesk focuses on the endpoint and securing and optimizing and simplifying the management of endpoints. So I think that the partnership is very strong and provides a very strong value proposition to our joint customers.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vadim. For many customers, enterprise organizations out there, moving to cloud-based virtual desktops and away from physical desktops seems to be like an uphill battle. It's perceived as something that they want to do, but really not something that they know how to do. When we are working with customers or talking with customers, how are you helping those customers who are interested in embracing cloud virtual desktops with AVD? And kind of what specific roles do your companies play in simplifying that journey? Vadim, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, so there are several things that need to happen in order for a transition to a cloud-based DaaS or desktop as a service solution to be successful. Number one, it's important to understand the ramifications of that transition, right? Both in terms of the technical architecture, what is this deployment, what is this workload going to look like once it's in the cloud, what type of VMs is it going to be used, what regions is it going to be in. So there's kind of the technical and architectural component. There is the business side component, the costs and the commercials. How much is it going to cost? What is going to be my per user average cost? What's an incremental user going to cost me, right? So there's obviously a financial discussion that needs to take place. And then finally, what's going to be the end user experience? How performant is it going to be? How easy is it going to be to connect to from anywhere, from any device? So those are kind of the three areas that need to be assessed and planned for when working on a transition from an on-premises environment to a cloud-based DaaS. And what Nerdio helps customers do is it helps them price out and understand the cost components of a cloud-based AVD deployment, or an AVD deployment, which by definition is in the cloud. It also helps architect it, so design sort of what types of VMs are going to be used, what types of storage, where are profiles going to be stored, what are the cost implications of that, and then actually go ahead and execute those changes, actually be able to go in and quickly provision a AVD environment from start to finish, really in a matter of hours as opposed to days or weeks, to then prepare the environment to do application migration and other work that needs to happen for a successful on-premises to cloud migration. What's really important in any such project is to set up a DaaS environment that's running side by side with the existing environment, whether it be on-premises VDI or a fully physical environment that users are running their applications in, and be able to have users running out of both, be able to put applications in the cloud, install things inside of the cloud VDI, and allow users to do their testing and validation before really cutting people over into this new model. So Nerdio kind of helps with that planning and the deployment process. And then once the deployment is sort of successful and has been validated, then it helps organizations to scale it out. So go from a small pilot of a dozen users to hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of users very quickly, thanks to the elasticity of the public cloud. And then once that environment is running in production, it helps turn all the necessary dials to reduce the cost and make sure that everything is efficient and there isn't a lot of waste in the system that's spinning all of these cost meters when resources aren't being used.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Vadim. That paints a very intriguing story. Yeah, when I speak with customers, they often speak about reasons why they want to move to the cloud, like enabling work from anywhere, simplifying the management of their endpoints, and the thought of a more cost-effective EUC strategy. Emanuel, how does Stratodesk help customers embrace these types of ideas?
Yeah, so that's interesting. We are hearing very similar stories from our customers. It's like, yes, I want to transition to a cloud-based desktop, but I'm seeing sort of entry barriers. And so we say, okay, what are these entry barriers? I mean, certainly there are cost and server-side entry barriers that are being solved with AVD and Nerdio. But on the endpoint side, there are entry barriers, and the last thing we want, right, is a customer deciding to not do that migration. That's good for the customer. That would be good ultimately for the customer because of things like, yeah, some of my machines are bring your own desktop, BYOD. We cannot install something on that. We have security issues. We don't have the VPN, or we have too much VPN. You have all these things. This is where we come in. Our solution, as I said, it's a Linux-based operating system that can be installed on the PC, meaning wiping off Windows or whatever was on that machine, but it can also be live booted on a USB stick. And so this is what we saw, obviously, during these COVID lockdowns. We had customers. We even have a testimonial video online where somebody said, yeah, we sent out 10,000 USB sticks with the Stratodesk software with no touch, so our people could connect to their digital workspace from their homes via their own machines without actually us, the company, touching their Windows that they have on their user-owned or employee-owned devices. So that's one very, very important side of the story, especially as we say, we have it here on the slide, enabling work from anywhere. The second thing is, we as Stratodesk, we sometimes position ourselves as like the Switzerland of end user computing, Switzerland being neutral. It's funny that I say this being Austrian, and if you do skiing, you know about the rivalry between Austria and Switzerland. But so we Stratodesk, we see ourselves as the neutral portion. And in this case, what this means down to earth, it's brutal, it's investment protection, right? If you use Stratodesk, you don't need to worry about changes in your IT landscape. So yes, we can work with an existing, say, Citrix VMware-based VDI, and we can assist a transition to AVD that is being based on Nerdio. For a customer using Stratodesk, it is really as simple as logging into the management software and saying, okay, these machines, connection to AVD, and that's it. This is like 5 mouse clicks, and that's it. So the benefit is in many different ways. On premise, in your office, by running your office machines in a more efficient way than you can do by leaving an old Windows, right? The worst thing you can have is an old, barely managed Windows operating system. Some people even run outdated, unsupported Windows versions, right? We don't want anyone to do that. And the second thing is, outside of your premises, in users' homes, what are the challenges that people face? And these are real world stories, right? I'm not making this up. So consider somebody takes the laptop home, because COVID is only 2 weeks, right? We stay home 2 weeks, watch Netflix, rescue the world, like it was in 2020. And then you find out this particular machine hasn't applied Windows updates for 430 days. And there was no way to check, right? Because it was outside, it could not connect to the company's WSUS server. So that means you had an employee working on this unmanaged endpoint. It's terrible. Then I have heard other stories. This is kind of funny. You want to avoid these things like WSUS server not reachable. So you open up the VPN, and then suddenly you find all the end user smart bulbs in your corporate network. I don't want to see our people's smart bulbs. I don't even want my own smart bulbs to be forwarded to a company network. So this is where we step in. As I said, our Linux-based operating system goes out on any hardware you might already have, on hardware that you might want to buy, but you can buy inexpensive hardware. You do not need to buy, say, a dedicated thin client device for $600. And don't get me wrong, yeah, I love these machines from a hardware perspective. Yeah, they're a wonderful small form factor, but the functionality is in the software. So nobody should have to buy a $600 device to get what we can do 10 times better on existing hardware, even on a Raspberry Pi. So yes, we can even connect to AVD from a Raspberry Pi. So I guess that sets up the security, the cost, and the manageability that we provide. And ultimately, it means we dramatically, and I really, really want to stress the word dramatically, we lower the entry barrier to any modern cloud-based workspace dramatically.
Awesome. Thanks, Emmanuel. That paints a very good picture. I think I'm hearing a lot of similarities between Nerdio and Stratodesk, and some of the key things that I'm taking away from both of your points are really simplifying the process of moving M, whether that's simplifying at the edge of the endpoint or simplifying the deployment into a cloud virtual desktop, but also, the entry barrier of reducing the cost and complexity for customers as they make those decisions. I want to shift a little bit as we're talking about Microsoft and Azure Virtual Desktop. I think I speak for most of the audience when I say that we've been thrilled to see Microsoft really embracing cloud virtual desktops, and the amount of effort that they've put behind Azure Virtual Desktops, or AVD, over the last couple of years. And we were equally just as excited when they recently announced in the past year Windows 365 and the evolution there. However, deciding which platform is best for me is always something that I struggle with. Vadim, can you help me understand why a customer might choose AVD over Windows 365 or the other way around, and what the advantages of each might be for a customer? Maybe what's a scenario where I might use both?
Yeah, so maybe let's start by kind of defining what Windows 365 is and versus Azure Virtual Desktop, and maybe what are some of the core differences. So, Azure Virtual Desktop came out as Windows Virtual Desktop back in 2019, and it's really a flexible cloud VDI, what Microsoft called a PaaS service, right? It's a platform as a service offering. It runs in Azure. It's fully configurable. It has lots of different dials to turn, and you pay for it on consumption. So if a VM is running and delivering a desktop, you pay for that compute meter, that storage meter. If you shut that VM down, you turn off the cost of the compute meter. So there's lots of dimensions and lots of different knobs and controls that you can pull, as with anything in Azure. Windows 365 that came out, I believe it was announced in August or July of 21, so it's just about a year old. It really looks at a new concept in cloud desktop computing, and Microsoft calls it Cloud PC, and it provides users a comparable computing experience in the cloud with Windows as they would expect from their local physical device. Now, what that means practically is, Windows 365 is more of a SaaS, software as a service offering, that is priced on a fixed per user per month basis. So there isn't that component of consumption and turning things on and off. It's a license like you buy for any other type of software like Office 365 or other Microsoft 365 products. And it's provided in a one-to-one user to desktop basis. So each user gets their own cloud PC that's priced on a fixed basis, on a monthly fixed basis, and it's their machine. It doesn't have any profile virtualization, any sort of complexities like Azure Virtual Desktop has. And because these two products really deliver and fit best into their own unique use cases, what we find is that many enterprise customers are actually using both in the same environment. So Windows 365 and AVD is not an either or story. It's more an and story. So you have some users that may be using Windows 365 for some use cases, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And then you have AVD that could be used by other users within the same organization for a different set of use cases. Now, what are those use cases? So AVD has a couple of capabilities that make it uniquely positioned for high density environments where users can be pulled together onto a group of VMs. So with Windows 365, as I mentioned, each user gets their own desktop, what AVD calls a personal desktop or a persistent desktop, whatever EUC term you want to use, but each user has their own machine and they're the only ones who are using that machine, which is great for manageability and user experience, but it obviously has that aspect that it's a standalone device that's used by a single user only. AVD has the capability of pooling users and assigning multiple users to either the same VM or typically a group of VMs or a pool of VMs, making it able to do more denser or denser deployments that may have a different cost profile as compared to Windows 365. Another thing that AVD can do is provide remote applications as opposed to a complete desktop experience. With cloud PCs and Windows 365, the way a user interacts with their desktop is the way they would interact with a physical desktop. They log into Windows, they have a desktop, they have their start menu, they have all of their applications they can click on, and it's a full, true cloud PC experience. AVD has the ability to publish select applications to individual users without giving them a complete desktop experience if they don't need it. So I would say the main differences are the way it's priced and packaged. Windows 365 is fixed per user subscription versus AVD is consumption-based billing based on infrastructure costs, and the different use cases when the two technologies are used. AVD is used for pooled and multi-session environments, as well as application publishing, and Windows 365 is used for a physical PC replacement type of a technology use case.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. Emanuel, you mentioned Switzerland is the stance of Stratodesk before, and you mentioned really helping customers with some of these more legacy technologies of on-prem Citrix and VMware moving into the cloud with AVD, and how you're helping them with that. Any reason why a Stratodesk device wouldn't merge into Windows 365 versus AVD? Is there any changes that they need, or do you guys continue to evolve in that?
Yeah, absolutely not. It's the same device that can connect equally well to both Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. In fact, you don't even have to change any settings for that. It's funny that you say Switzerland. I was thinking about that too, and saying to myself, great that Vadim is answering that question. But so we can certainly connect to both of these. As I said, it's important for us to be neutral, also in the sense to work with, say, the legacy platforms. You know, there is certain unrest in the market because both VMware and Citrix have been bought. They have new owner. This is something that I am hearing, especially in more strategic conversations where people say, should we really go down that route? You know, I'm CEO of this company, have thousands of desktops, not really sure. Should I bet my career on this? And I say, yeah, at least you have a choice, right? We have AVD. As Vadim said, many people got very, very excited when Microsoft announced they would go down that route and offer a cloud desktop. I think it's the right time to have this alternative. The cost factor is something that people should definitely look at. What's the cost of, say, AVD, Windows 365, plus Nerdio, plus Stratodesk, as opposed to any other solution? Again, I'm Switzerland. I'm not saying anything. But by the way, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area and have been for 13 years. So I'm not directly Austrian anymore. So this is something people should look at. And this is a very, very compelling case, honestly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great segue for our next topic. You mentioned a lot of uncertainty in the market right now as we look at virtual desktops and everything moving into the cloud, and now cloud virtual desktops, cloud PCs. We clearly have two people here that we're able to speak with that have a very strong understanding of Microsoft's offerings and this technology as a whole. I'd love to hear from each of you. With what you've seen in the cloud desktop space up to this point, what are your thoughts on the future of Microsoft in this space with AVD, with Windows 365, and as these technologies evolve for Microsoft? Vadim, how do you see the next, maybe let's say the next year or two, and then maybe what does desktop EUC computing look like for us in 5 to 10 years, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely pretty excited to be in this space at this point in time. I've been in, I guess, what you would call the UC for, well over 20 years. I started with Citrix MetaFrame in the late 90s, and sort of have seen the space evolved. I've built businesses using this technology, and it's always been interesting that Microsoft really didn't have let's call it a strong positive stance on this market, right? They weren't very supportive of it, and it was really difficult to even work with other software providers who were writing applications. Like, as soon I remember, when we were running our managed services provider and we were using virtualization, we happened to be using the VMware product stack, and as soon as a support person of a software vendor will see that little VMware icon in the system tray, they would say, oh, we don't support it, right? It was always an uphill battle trying to get desktop virtualization to be a legitimate way of delivering IT in a modern kind of way. And all of that changed pretty much on a dime when Microsoft announced WVD. Microsoft basically sort of sent the signal to the market that, well, yes, now we are behind this. It's our operating system, and we are going to enable Windows 10 for multi-session. We're going to have a native cloud service that's going to do it. So I think that really reinvigorated the market, that the maker of the operating system is now really behind it. And when Microsoft doubled down and released another service that's really aiming to virtualize and make a new type of a PC, a cloud PC with Windows 365, I think that really has accelerated the adoption. Take all of that and couple it with COVID and people seeing the value of remote work and seeing the value of desktop virtualization as an enabling technology to remote work. And I think a lot of these factors came together in 2020, particularly maybe the end of 2019, to really drive adoption of desktop as a service, both during those initial couple of years, 2020, 21, and 22, but also in the near future. I really, based on all the research I'm reading and what I'm observing with our customers and the market in general, I think there's going to be quite rapid adoption of DaaS, desktop as a service, as a real model of enabling remote work, which, what organization nowadays is not thinking about a remote work strategy if they don't already have one? And this is a really powerful way of enabling that type of a strategy. So I'm very excited to be part of this space, and I can't wait how it evolves in the coming years.
Awesome. Thanks, Vadim. That certainly, if it comes to fruition, leaves a lot of endpoints sitting around the old offices. Emanuel, how do you feel? Do you share the same thoughts on the future of Microsoft and AVD, or what's your take on the next couple of years of this technology?
Yes, absolutely. And see, from our perspective, I mean, we like competition, obviously. I mean, everyone likes competition. Yeah? This is the most American thing. Yeah, different companies competing, one being better and trying to get the customers' attention. So VDI, that was at some point, I hate to say, but if I think 10 years ago, this was almost like a fringe thing, right? Very, very narrow niche. And technology, of course, has matured over that time, but still some people, they loved it. Others were like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of fringe. And now we can see that this technology, now, of course, we call it doesnt, desktop as a service or cloud desktop. But this idea now is really becoming mainstream. Right? Once you can go online to a Microsoft webpage and put up your credit card and say, these are my desktops, and here is a Nerdio manager, all in the same thing, right? This is clearly mainstream. So nobody can say that we are a niche or anything. On the other hand, if we look at the other players like the Citrixes, the VMwares, no matter the uncertainty right now, I see these relatively cool, the new owners have spent billions of dollars. They probably won't shut it down, right? They want to continue running things, make money out of it. So that means these products are not going away. It's not like customers have to make emergency contingency plans, but we can clearly see where the market is going. I think new users, and this could be smaller companies. I actually would call it the democratization of VDI. It's not like you need 24/7 staff, highly trained people, proper servers, storage, all redundant. This is prohibitive for smaller companies, right? And now, thanks to AVD, it means smaller companies potentially going up to your neighborhood mom and pop car repair shop. They can get their 2, 3, 4, 5 Windows desktops. So it means VDI gets out of this strategic Gartner Group CIO 100,000 endpoints corner, and yeah, the democratization of VDI. On the other hand, what I'm hearing from customers is, and this sounds scary, but if you think about it, it isn't. Companies want to get rid of EUC altogether. And I would say this is comparable to how companies outsourced logistics, right? It's very rare for somebody or some company that is producing something to run their own fleet of trucks. You have a dedicated logistics partner, or there are multiple companies competing for being that logistics partner. We have global companies that provide logistics services. So I think this is a very similar trend that we are seeing, right? 10 years ago, we would have said migration to cloud is like taking your money to the bank. Yeah, 200 years ago, nobody would have done that. But not today, we know our money is safer at the bank than it is at home under your pillow. And so I think getting rid of EUC is similar. You will always need somebody in charge in your company, but it's not like you have your data center. We're going out and reinstalling PCs, reimaging PCs. And the only thing why this analogy does not really match up totally is because even if in a perfect world, if everything was cloud, you still have that piece of hardware where you, for the end users, where the end users connect their keyboard and their screen. You still have that piece of hardware. Be it, again, old PC, new PC, Intel NUC, Intel Compute Stick, Raspberry Pi, anything like this. You still have this in the user's hands, on the user's desktop, on the user's table. And this is where Stratodesk comes in. Yeah. This is why I am excited, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you make a great point. We're still going to have to interact in some way. I was talking with a colleague recently, and we referenced an old article, and the article title was "Your Grandmother Doesn't Need an iPhone," right? And for some of us on the call, you'll remember a company, a small giant company called BlackBerry. For others on the call, you might think it's just a tasty treat in the refrigerator, but there was a company called BlackBerry that absolutely dominated the cell phone world and the corporate industry. And the article said that your grandmother doesn't need an iPhone. Flash forward to today, I FaceTime with my own grandmother on the iPhone. So it's it's exciting to see a shift in how users are interacting from an EUC perspective, and I very much agree with your thoughts. I think that we are in a paradigm shift of how we look at EUC, how we consume EUC, and we're starting to cannibalize some older antiquated thought process when it comes to not only where that desktop lives and how it's managed, but what endpoints we use to actually access that and go be trucking companies or go be attorneys' offices or whatever the enterprise customer is. Speaking of specific customers, I want to shift into some use cases. I think it's always good to hear from CEOs of their prospective companies. What customers are you working with? Certainly, we don't have time to discuss every vertical, but if you wouldn't mind, Vadim, could you give us an example of a customer that you've worked with, maybe what vertical they're with, and how you were able to help that customer succeed in making that transition into cloud virtual desktops?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Matt. So you can see on the screen, obviously, some of the industries that that we work with. We work with obviously state and local government, as you can see, a lot in education, financial services, banking, really pretty cross industry in terms of where virtual desktops are used, right? Because everyone is running Windows, everyone is running applications. I guess by way of example, one of the use cases I like to mention is very, very early on during COVID, maybe a week or two into the lockdowns. And actually, let me back up a step. I mentioned we launched our Nerdio Manager for Enterprise product in early 2020. We happened to have launched it on March 9th, which I believe was the week that the lockdowns happened, at least in the US. And very quickly, we got very busy helping customers onboard to Azure Virtual Desktop, or WVD back then, because it was all PowerShell-based commands that you needed in order to get anything going in Windows Virtual Desktop. And Nerdio provided a nice UI with auto-scaling and all the various capabilities I mentioned earlier. And we had one particular customer that happened to be a local government in Canada that was running a pretty large health system. And they needed to obviously send their employees home, and they needed to allow them to still be productive. And they basically were thinking about WVD, they were planning for WVD, and then as soon as the lockdowns happened, they needed to accelerate. So we spent probably a couple of days standing up their environment, getting their images built out. They had different, clinical images. They had, people doing scheduling and clinicians and different, maybe 5 or 6 different deployment types. And then I remember, like a week or so into the project, we got on a call and I see they have 15 or 16,000 users logging into the environment and are active and actually, working and doing their work, right? So within a week or less of time, going from, 0 footprint to 15, 16,000 active users was really a kind of a pivotal moment to see what the power of this new DaaS or this new cloud VDI service is, that you can go and deploy users that quickly and have them be productive with a virtual desktop. So, that's a story I like to share because that was kind of a light bulb moment for me, that, a week prior to that, thinking about getting 15,000 users onto a system in a week in an on-premises VDI environment is sort of mind-boggling. As Emanuel mentioned, you need storage and redundancy and servers and data centers and architecture and deployment and testing. There's a lot that goes into building an on-premises VDI environment, but in the cloud, it could all be done within the course of a single week. So that's a story that I wanted to share.
Awesome. Thanks, Vadim. Emanuel, any good stories on how customers are leveraging Stratodesk and maybe taking over older technology or leveraging new technology? You mentioned Raspberry Pis and a couple other really interesting devices. What's a story you can share with us on a good customer use case?
Yeah, so we see similar stories as Vadim has said, like this quick build up. One thing, and I remember a particular customer who it's a commercial enterprise. They run somewhat 7,000-8,000 machines, I believe. And for them, it was very important. I guess for everyone, it was very important to stay up to date. There was and still is a lot of innovation happening on the AVD end. So that means we get update from Microsoft that we put in our endpoint solution. So it's very important to stay up to date. We also saw this like I would say almost like a crash course as how to get an enterprise up and running. We need basic connectivity, we need optimization, we need printing, we need all these things. And then at some point, once you are through that crash course, you see how people are adding users in thousands, in batches of thousands. And this is really this breakthrough thinking moment where you really say, wow, this is now going up, and then customers are definitely happy. So I hear that customers like it. So nobody, this old saying, nobody got fired for choosing or buying IBM. I think, right, Vadim, you will also be able to say, I have not heard of anyone ever getting fired for switching to AVD. And that's fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both for that. I want to transition now to questions from the audience. I think Allison just teed up the chat here. But if anyone here that's joined us today has any questions for Vadim, for Emanuel, or for both, feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and you can unmute your line to ask directly. So we got one question in here from Garian. Garian asks, how does Nerdio reduce cost for over provisioning of AVD resources, if at all?
I guess I'll take that one. So great question, Gary, and we definitely do. That's certainly at the core of what our product does. And to give you a bit of a background on kind of what the product does from an optimization perspective, is we look at the various aspects of Azure and see where are there optimization opportunities. The top two categories of where there could be lots of optimizations is on compute and storage. So when you say, if resources are over provisioned, that typically means the VMs are either too big or there are too many of them. And what Nerdio Manager Autoscale does is it actually will only power on the resources when there is sufficient user demand to need the additional resources. So imagine you have a host pool with 10 machines, and each machine can support 10 users. Nerdio Manager will make sure that only the right number of machines are turned on at the right time. And if they're not being used, it will shut them down. It will also flag for you when you have VMs that may be oversized. Maybe you only have one machine and it's, can support 20 users, but you're only putting 10 users on it. Nerdio Manager will give you an indication that may be an over-provisioned VM and you should consider downsizing it to something smaller. An example on the storage side would be something like when you are deploying a virtual desktop, you typically want to optimize for user experience. And one of the ways to do that is to give your users a fast disk. Typically, a premium SSD disk will be the Azure product that you would give a user in order for them to have a good user experience. However, when that machine is powered off, if a user is not logged in, why are you paying for a premium SSD disk? No one's using it, so the performance doesn't really matter. There is another storage tier in Azure called standard HDD, which is basically spinning media, that's 75% less expensive than the premium SSD disk. And what Nerdio Manager can do is not only shut that VM down when it's not being used, which stops the compute meter from spinning, but it can take that disk and in real time convert it from SSD to spinning media. And then when that machine powers on, convert it back to SSD. And the result is when the user is logged in and running and using the machine, they're getting the best possible performance. But when that machine is turned off, you're getting the best possible cost for the organization at no cost to the user because they're obviously not active on the system at that time.
Awesome. Thanks, Vadim. I think the next question is for you, Emanuel. Does Stratodesk support any passwordless sign-on options that Microsoft is pushing towards?
I hate passwords. I totally do. So yes, so the way that works is we don't interfere with the login process in the sense that we Stratodesk would draw a login dialog that hard codes username and password. In fact, we are using Microsoft's very own client components like MSAL, Microsoft Authentication Library. And these mean that you are being forwarded to Microsoft's own login process, Microsoft's own login dialogues, whatever that means. It can then tell you, hey, you need to open up your phone and the Authenticator app. And then we get a token out of that. And this token is then being fed back into the AVD SDK, which is the fundamental of our AVD client that we have coded out of Microsoft's SDK. So long story short, yes, we are not in any way restricting Microsoft's login options.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question is from Luis in Mexico. He says, right now, a lot of people are returning to their offices. So, what is the value for your proposal in order to keep those customers using a cloud virtual desktop when they're moved back into the office from that remote home pandemic experience?
I'll take that one, Matt, if Emmanuel is okay with that. I think, Louis, it's a great question. VDI is obviously a great enabling technology for remote work. It is also a great enabling technology for in-office work, but it depends, right? It depends on the type of applications your users are using, the IT environment that's in play, the security requirements, etc. The great thing about AVD, and I see you maybe mentioned Citrix as part of your question as to why, what's the value of using Citrix? It's an expensive or isn't a cheap solution. And I couldn't agree more with you there. If you're using Citrix for remote work scenarios, when users are not working remotely, you're still paying for those licenses. However, with AVD and with Nerdio specifically, you only pay when users are actually logging in and using the system. So imagine a scenario where all of the users want to work from home, and all of a sudden for several months in a row, there was a lot of usage. There's a cost to it, and you're going to pay a certain amount for that cloud-based VDI environment. But if all those users come back into the office and there is no usage, because it's based on consumption and there isn't any consumption, there isn't a cost. However, you still have a system that, first of all, enables the occasional user who may be working remotely, or maybe you have a hybrid work policy where users work from the office 3 days a week and from home 2 days a week, or just as a disaster recovery solution, VDI in the cloud gives you the option to allow users to work remotely without costing you money unless they actually do. Hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. Thanks, Vadim. Yeah, we've got another one here. This looks like for you, Emmanuel. Does Stratodesk pass through peripherals like webcams, headsets, speakerphones to AVD sessions?
Yes.
Awesome. And can that be used with Teams calling?
Yes.
There you go. Simple and straightforward from Emmanuel. Any other questions out there in the audience?
We have a question here from somebody who has issues with contacting Stratodesk support. So we use Cloudflare to protect our website. What have you done that you cannot go through Cloudflare? So maybe if you are from abroad, from a different country, that might ask you to do certain check, like a JavaScript, I'm a real person check, but usually continental US, this should be all open. You can contact us at support@stratodesk.com. We have just recently switched our platform, though. I think that happened last week. So if you did anything in that time, maybe that was the problem. So I would suggest to try again. And whatever the actual problem is, I would say make sure that you are on the latest version of our operating system. As I said earlier, especially with AVD, there was a lot of innovation in these last two years. And even if something is like half a year out of date, a feature could not be there. Microsoft has released different features. Webcam redirection, for example, was some of the features that I believe that was released in 2022 only, or maybe it was end of 2021. Anyway, it was not in the very early version. So please make sure that. And otherwise, if we get your email here, we can definitely forward this, and I see our team is already following up. We don't want that happen, that somebody cannot access our webpage, obviously. So I'm taking a screenshot so we can for sure following up.
Yeah, it looks like guys got it working now. Maybe it's maybe the problem is already resolved. A lot of great questions. Any other questions? We got a couple minutes left with Vadim and Emmanuel. Any other questions from the group?
Maybe questions about running.
Yeah, questions about running. What what their favorite brand of shoes is, something like that is always on the table. Okay, looks like we're all wrapped up. So listen, Vadim, Emanuel, thank you so much for your time today. I hope for the audience this has been very informative as you look towards embracing Microsoft AVD. Certainly, if you have any questions, you should have our contact information from the screen. You can reach out to Vadim or Emanuel directly, or myself. I'm the VP of Sales here at Nerdio. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hopefully serving you in the future. Have a great day, everyone.